So, hello, everybody. We're here again with another wonderful interview we've been waiting for. And we met this person. A lot of people know her actually in the adopted community. We reached out on Twitter. I think that's originally how we met, and we've had a back and forth. We're excited to have Anne Heffron here. And she's also the author of You Don't Look Adopted, which is
Such
an
a great
adoptee.
title.
Yeah, it's such a great title, an adoptee memoir. So, welcome, Anne.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for doing this.
We're
Thank
excited to
you.
have you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So we want to just dig in and kind of start from the beginning, your adopted story. And
I think my story is like so many other people's stories. I was a baby. And then I went to a family, and I thought I just lived my life. And then like things were kind of strange, but I thought they were all my problems or my parents' problems. It never, like, I was someone who just wasn't quite on the track that people and myself thought I should be on. And then when I was in my 40s, things start to really go off the rails because things, like, I couldn't stay married, couldn't save money, just things were getting harder and harder, and I just couldn't figure out why. And I don't know what was the sort of inciting moment for coming out of the fog, but something happened where I just realized that this, oh my gosh, almost all my problems are connected with being adopted. And then I understood, okay, I've been trying for such a long time to write. Like, I started trying when I was 18, and I could never find the story, whatever the story was. And then I went to this writing retreat, and the woman promised me, like many other people had promised me, that she could get me to write my story. And that didn't happen. But I met the writer of the book, The Help, who was there sort of by accident. And she said to me, if you ever want a place to write, you could stay at my place for a little bit. And it was such a great offer, but I didn't have the money to fly to New York. I was in Boston, and I was in California. And so I just said thanks. But then I came home and I realized, like, I need to write. I need to write my story. I'll do anything. I'll go so into debt. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to get this. I'm going to do this, and then I'll let the chips fall where they may. And so I went, and it ended up being 3 months, and it was the greatest 3 months of my life. And I did write it, and I did publish it. And then it's been almost 5 years, and I learned so much in that 5 years, because I learned that while telling my story was really important, that I had, but I hadn't addressed my body. And so that's where I went to a therapist, and I had a medicine session with her, and I did MDMA and psilocybin. And that is the before and after, like, in my life. Because before I did it, I didn't know how much pain was in my body. And then during it, I experienced so much pain. But the neat thing is, with MDMA, you don't panic. So I just kept saying, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this, because I could feel the pain working its way through my body. And it was like my whole body was thorns, and it was on fire. It was, beyond what I would think I could handle. And she said to me, I've never worked with an adoptee that didn't die. So I just held on, and then and it went through me, and then it was gone. And the session was about 8 hours long, and I was choking on mud. Like, it was really, really intense. And then afterwards, the day afterwards, for the first time in my life, for the whole day, my brain was in one part, it was one piece. Like I could see everything. I understood everything. in in a really, really clear, like my jaw hung open all day long. Number one, because the tension had left my jaw. So I was just hanging open. And number two, I was like, holy mother God, I cannot believe this much pain was in my body. And all I had to do was take some medicine
and get through it.
And I don't drink really. I don't take aspirin. I don't smoke pot. I'm not a like, I don't believe in taking substances, but now I totally do because since then that was in the summer, and I've probably taken mushrooms like 10 times or 15 times because they keep giving me information.
Yeah.
My body, it's like all of these sort of holdings that I've had since I was in my mother, like my whole system has been tight. My cells are tight. And what the mushrooms do is it lets feelings, it lets my body experience feelings. And what I'm learning to do is not attach stories to the feelings, just let them come through me. So I might start feeling this really intense thing that part of my brain will start to panic, but then I realize, these are things that are in your body. Your body's expressing them. You're getting to feel. This is what anger. I had one session where I was yelling in my head, fuck you, for like 2 hours. Just fuck you, fuck you. And then I realized, like, wow, part of me is really angry. And there's no space. There's all there is fuck you. And so the mushrooms are always a journey. So there's the hard part. It's not always hard, but for me, it's mostly hard. And then it comes to some conclusion. So in my body, I had a funeral for fuck you. So fuck you, like it died. And then it wasn't in my body anymore. And I'm finding that the first 57 years of my life have been about negotiating my head and how to put together the story of what happened. And now it's about learning to feel and be in my body. So I don't feel like an adoptee anymore. I feel like a human being who's learning to negotiate. My body isn't really different from people have trauma, whether they're adopted or not. And I think part of what I was suffering from was thinking I was special or different from other people because of my brand of trauma. But what I'm learning from feeling my body is that you're not that special.
Yeah.
Everybody feels anger. Everybody feels rejection. And that's a relief I don't feel isolated anymore. I feel like.
So your adoption, you felt made you feel isolated
yeah.
And yeah.
Isolated, but not knowing I just felt different,
Different.
And you hadn't connected the adoption to that prior?
No, it's just like, okay, I must be a little weird. Like
that was me, kind of keep it in, like, oh, I'm a little strange. People don't know.
Yeah. And you don't look strange to other people, right? They're like, why? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Did you know anybody else who was adopted?
My brothers, and I worked with someone when I was in junior high who was adopted, but it didn't ring bells. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I didn't know that it meant anything really.
Yeah.
And it means so much. I mean, I have, your journey. I have friends who are therapists who are very much into psilocybins and EMDR therapy, and just the body connection with the mind is so, we make ourselves sick inside with anger and repression and, all these feelings. And it's interesting listening to you. I'm like, yeah.
What do you hear?
Well, I feel like you have a release, right? Like this release with your mind and your body are kind of coming together where you can be like, oh, anger is just a huge thing we hold in, right? And
Mhm.
comes out in all these little ways. And, it's
Mhm.
just a like a breath. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
not even saying I don't feel adopted.
Mhm.
That's big shift, I'm
Yeah, that's a
sure.
big transformation
Yeah.
because it's funny how I didn't connect adoption to my problems. I mean, I did on an intellectual level. Um, I did use substances and then got clean for 10 years from 20 to 30 and went to therapy. And, I intellectualized. Yes, of course, I must be messed up because of this. But I didn't really connect that emotionally until a few years ago. And everything made sense, like, oh, coming out of the fog, and it all made sense. And now listening to you, I see there's yet another layer that is available to get to. And that sounds really appealing. I imagine I would probably have a similar fuck you experience.
Yeah. It was, in another experience I had that was so neat. Well, it wasn't neat at the time, but the mushrooms feel like this God, like I'll make a list of things I want, and they generally go right down the list. And then they also do things I didn't ask for. And at one point they had me experience, when my daughter was young, times that I had abandoned her or hurt her in some way.
Mm.
And they started to show them to me, but I was feeling them, and I was also feeling her feelings. And I said to them, I don't think I can do this. I think it's too much. And they said, you can. So I sat there and I watched these incidences of when I had abandoned my daughter in various ways. And then after, and it was, it was like, oh God, like this is heartbreaking. But then afterwards they said, see? And I realized, like, she survived and I survived. And it's this, I go back in and I take them, and then I lie in bed and I put on an eye pillow. And every time it starts, I'm like, wow, I'm never going to do this again. Because it's already, the first parts, I've had a couple of sessions that are so fun, like confetti shoots out my heart, but
Right.
mostly it's been like, whoa.
And have you had a conversation with your daughter about that? Like the healing part of that part? I am
I
curious.
did, when I had the very first session with the MDMA, I
Mm.
had the experience of realizing that I had all these orange tentacles inside of me that were my mother's unrealized dreams,
Your birth mother?
my adoptive mother.
Okay.
And then I realized I have the same tentacles in my daughter's body.
Mhm.
And then I had to realize, like, wow, I'm not 100% living my life either. Like, I've put my unrealized dreams in her. So I pulled out my mom's tentacles out of me, and I pulled out my tentacles out of my daughter. And then afterwards I called her and I told her I pulled my she was sort of like,
Great, Mom.
good job, Mom. Like, okay, gotta go.
One day she'll thank you for that.
Yeah.
Is she your only child?
Yeah.
It's I kind of think about this often. And in fact, I had a conversation with my son, and I'm not going to get into it just on the off chance that he listens to it, but just that I didn't see I think I spent his whole life being really conscientious to not do to him what was done to me or how I felt about my childhood. So I gave him, I just turned all my attention to him at the risk of my own lack of attention to myself. But I noticed that some of that adoptee stuff that we have of like pleasing was transferred onto him. And I didn't realize this until last night. And
Wow.
yeah,
It's big. It's, when we were reading these books that we're reading through our podcast, I was like, oh, I'm kind of reading about my son who's not adopted, because I've done the number on him a little bit, and it's what you're saying is like, oh, I feel like Sarah, oh, there's another layer to come.
I
Could be in.
definitely feel like I I mean, part of me thinks adopted people shouldn't have kids because, you know, I mean, we need a lot of training, because when I think about, you take someone who has as an insecure attachment as I do, and I thought I was doing her a favor by giving her all that attention.
Me
And
too.
I realized like it's an incredible amount of stress for her,
Yeah.
because then she feels like she has to be perfect, even though that wasn't at all. I was trying to say, you can be any way you want and I will love you. But what came across was, I need to be perfect so my mom's okay.
Yes. My son has, I think he's got that too.
That's hard.
Mhm.
Is it? Yeah. What you just said, like, should adopted people have children? That's interesting, because it's like, ouch. But, you know, and clueless. I was clueless through my parenting. I was thinking, oh, you know, I'm doing great. I love, you know, because you love them so much. Love them to death. Yeah.
Well, I was writing the other night in this writing class. She gives us prompts, and I literally just lost what I said, so we're gonna have to erase that. It just flew out of my head. Sorry.
About being a parent.
With the writing prompt.
Yes, it'll come back to me. We can.
We need microdosing.
Yes. I need the alertness.
You know, I mean, I'll say extreme things sometimes, and so to say adoptees shouldn't have children, I think that's a hard thing to say, and it's also dismissive of the children that we had. And I think that's mostly my guilt talking, you know. And I think parents in general, you know, I mean, parents fuck up their kids. That's just what happens. So I don't.
There is no perfect situation.
There is no perfect. It's just, it's so painful to think about hurting your child when you wanted to love them, that I would say something like that, but I want to unsay that.
I agree. I mean, it is, I don't think anyone will take it like that either.
No, I don't think. It's just more of a realizing our deep damage that when we had children, mostly we weren't aware of it, or we hadn't, and there wasn't, especially in our age group, there wasn't, therapists weren't trained in adoption, so nobody recognized it, addressed it, dealt with it. So what you're saying, the intent with what you said, we understand.
Yeah.
And when you said the adoptees would need a lot of training to have kids, I'm like, and none of us had it.
Yeah, no.
I mean, that's the, you know,
well, and also
I'm just
then
figuring
when you
this
think
out
about
in our 50s. Yeah.
Our parents, you know, this generation, this baby scoop era, who the adoptees of that era, our parents, by and large, from the stories we hear, we were adopted due to fertility issues or this and that, and those parents didn't have the grief counseling before they adopted. So many of us were replacement babies or what have you. So it's just like this whole tier of unconscious parenting, I guess, would be a way to describe it, maybe.
Yeah, and you know what, my adoptive dad is not well, and so I went to see him, and I've had a really hard time my whole life just being in the room with him for different reasons. Even though he's got such a good heart and he's such a gentle person, but so I took mushrooms again, and I said, can you help me see my dad? Like, can you help me sit with my dad? I want to be able to sit with him before he dies. And what they showed me a bunch of things, but one thing they showed me is what it was like for my dad or an adoptive parent, like to have a baby in their arms that they couldn't create. So, you know, if they were infertile, so in some ways they're holding failure, right? And then they're looking with their eyes into the baby's eyes, but if their eyes hold unresolved grief, I felt like, wow, his grief went right into my body because he couldn't handle it. So he gave it to me. And it wasn't my sadness to carry. And it would have been so great if he had been able to process his own grief so that I wouldn't have had to. I think it's one of the reasons I can't look at him. It's because we don't have there isn't an emotionally honest relationship, because when I look at his eyes, I see sadness and someone that's kind of drowning and somehow reaching out for me for something. And I can never give enough. And I don't know what that thing is. So then I get angry.
That's so interesting. I was talking to another friend of mine the other day who was also adopted, and just the lack that we felt as kids was like having a dad, someone who, like, I still to this day, my dad, my parents were divorced. My dad got remarried. He was much closer to my step siblings than he is to me and my brothers at this point, growing up. So I just never had that champion of a father who adored me and wanted me to do well. And, none of that was completely lacking. And I too have a hard time sitting in a room with my dad and without squirming. If it's just the two of us, and him too. He's very uncomfortable alone with me.
Yeah, that word champion. I think, we were talking about liking our pets. Yeah. And I think in my dog's eyes, I'm a champion.
Yes, me too. With mine. You can see him right here.
And it's unwavering, right? Like there isn't any garbage between. I
no
find
agenda.
Animals, they are incredibly healing when you're intentional in knowing this is what I need. This is what's happening. Because it's really hard, like to not have that male figure. I feel like that's part of my spine. Like I have a degenerate, my spine is falling apart and I
crumbling.
It's crumbling. And I feel like that's a part of like not having this firm relational presence to the male energy.
What you were saying about looking in
I can't
the eyes
tolerate
with
them now.
when you were saying about looking in the eyes for grief, I was thinking when my my adopted mom was passing away recently, I always had that feeling of uncomfortable, like I wasn't giving enough or something. And she said something, in those hours where she said, thank you for all you've given. Like she said something about thanking me for all I've given. I didn't understand, but it's almost like we knew at that moment. It's like an unconscious what you're saying. It was very,
wow.
Because I wasn't the little girl who like wore the little dresses and was supposed to be a certain, I didn't fit the mold really.
What were you?
The tomboy getting in trouble, talking back,
what
feisty.
What kind of trouble did you get in?
All sorts of trouble in my young teenage years, and sports kind of turned me around in high school. Thank God, because I was going down a bad path with not a good crowd, and I did have the strong.
For you.
Yeah.
Oh, you went to the bad crowd.
I did not do well in my junior high years. I was, suspended and all sorts of things. But no one understood why. You're from this great family. Everyone loves you, older brother who wasn't adopted and was very successful in school and all those things. And I did have the strong male. My father was a strong male in my life, and I had sports. And my mom loved me, and I knew she loved me, but there was that, you were talking about the grief with the eyes. I always felt like we had this uncomfortable thing sometimes. And you saying that, and I was always trying to please, and I didn't know what I was like filling
scrambling
up.
To
like a cup,
fill the air.
Like a cup you're pouring water into, and then it's still leaking. And, I feel like that was healed a little bit in the later years, but just you saying that, I'm like, oh, I wish I had these realizations 10 years ago. Yes. To have these discussions and,
What do you think about, when I think about what you guys are talking about it, and that I feel like my diaphragm is such a big part of that, because taking a deep breath is hard for me.
Yeah.
And that even when I ran track in high school, it was my breath that would stop me. And so I've been really paying attention to my diaphragm. And then I have this feeling that it's this wall between my upper body and my lower body, and that the tension that I've felt my whole life keeps me from breathing deeply, which I feel like it has shortened the fibers of my diaphragm. And that I know the vagus nerve goes through the diaphragm. And so it feels like it's like if roots came out of my diaphragm, I feel like they're kind of rotten. And so then they make my abdomen feel sick, because there's the tightness in my diaphragm is hurting my vagus nerve, which goes into and this is all in my head, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like it. And then it goes into my abdomen, and then the vagus nerve reports back from my abdomen to my head if I'm okay or not. And it's saying you're not okay.
Yeah, the vagus nerve is my ex-husband's girlfriend just gave us a book on that, but it's I don't breathe.
Right.
You were saying that in soccer, when I would play soccer, it was always my thing, being winded.
Holding your breath though, is it I've done that my whole life too, just holding my breath, like
when you
sort of
breathe,
like
it's
waiting-
shocking. It's like,
waiting for the other shoe to drop or something. You're always on
That's it.
alert, high alert.
Yeah.
And I was a cigarette smoker for
Mm.
many, many years. That was the way I would breathe.
Wow, it would make you breathe deeply.
Make me breathe.
Now, if we do
quit
like
years ago.
meditation or something, it's like,
I do meditate every morning.
Yeah. I do too, but I can't. My heart feels tight, and it's not quite in the right place. Like it's like it's always a little anxious. And so I meditate every day. I do yoga, and I am super curious about how am I gonna catch my breath so that I can breathe. It's like I've had chiropractors work on my diaphragm. It's like, can you just get up there and just like free up all the stuff? But I can't. There's a catch in my body. I can't tell if it's because this is too tight. My chest muscles are too tight. But that, when you really take a deep breath and it's I can't fake it. And I do this thing where I yawn for 5 minutes when I'm driving. I'll make myself yawn, and it's super tiring, but it's super good for your jaw and your hips. And usually by about minute 5, I can get a real like jaw cracking yawn, but I keep forgetting to do it because it's so much work.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah, try it. Like, you just fake it, and then it is tiring, but your whole body. And if you release your jaw, you release your hips. So,
the whole jaw thing. I hold mine so tight, and the grinding and
right. Yeah, the grinding.
My problem is when I meditate, I can breathe. When I do it all, I can breathe. It's when I'm just doing my regular life, I'm not breathing, and I'll find myself like, take a deep breath, and I'm shocked that I haven't been breathing all day. It's like,
isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's got to be an emotional thing.
I think so, because if you're part of you is in hypervigilance, like breathing is a luxury. Because everything's in your eyes and your head, it's like and also I feel like not deep breathing is a way to not really be here, like
it remain you can stay sort of
interesting
at a distance, disconnected.
Yeah, like I'm not fully, part of me is running away. So
this is just stuff. It just might not get solved.
I don't know, but I think if we name it, right, and then I start going to people and saying, look, I want to breathe deeply. Like I don't mind if the next however rest of my life is, I just want to take a deep breath. Like, at least it'll be better than. Our body wants to breathe.
That's a like, look, if that's for the rest of your life, I just want to take a deep breath. Like for me, it's like, I'd love to find true love. You know what? No, maybe just take a deep breath.
Maybe take a deep breath.
I
like that if you name something, that's anything we name becomes less scary, or just you saying that, I'm thinking of many other things, but just naming it.
Yeah. I think that's what
you talked about the gut, and many adoptees have.
Yes, they do
have gut issues. I mean, everything starts with the gut, right? The
Right.
whole,
Well, when you think
it all
about
is
when we
there.
were born, I mean, I know a lot of people start with formula, but you're already off to like a rocky start
Mhm.
because
No
you're
breast
already
milk. Yeah.
drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not, I wasn't even held as when my birth mother gave birth. They took me away from her, so there was no holding.
Think about that with the baby, like you saying that, and think of little Sarah. I just think of that, just no one holding, just the nurses, and
Yeah.
you're in the hospital, and it's just not
Put into the nursery,
yeah, it's not the same.
then
No.
foster care, and yeah.
It's not, but if the hospital was informed, that look at this baby needs skin contact like this, there's so many things that could be done,
Mhm.
to make it better. And I think that's one reason why it's so important for adoptees to tell their story. Because one thing that it's like if a war vet comes home and then someone's doing fireworks and they're in the
Yes.
closet, right? Like it's shameful if they're hiding that they're in the closet. But if they say, look, I have PTSD, so I'm going to go in the closet, then it's not shameful. And so if I'm on a date and all of a sudden I get, I don't know, if I just want to run away or, get diarrhea or something, it's
Yeah.
like, if I can name it without shame, then it normalizes it. And then we're on the same human level. So I just feel like it's
Yes.
so important for us to name these things.
That's a great idea too, just in terms of also being able to have honest relationships
Yes.
with people.
Yeah.
I feel like running away right now.
Yeah.
I tell my husband this all the time, like, I can't right now. And he's like, okay, I got it. You got all your
Oh, that's
stuff.
so neat.
Yeah.
But he's the first person I've been able to do that with, and just say,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
he'll do something funny or hug me tight, and I'm kind of like, he just get out of it. Like,
Yeah.
and he's not offended because first of all, he now, especially with this podcast, he's really, but even before, he'd be like, I get it. Yeah. This
Isn't that
stuff.
amazing?
Oh,
That's
it's
so, to
relieving.
find someone.
Yes.
It's relieving because
Wow.
I was always the pleaser before, and like,
Yeah.
okay, I just won't say that I'm super uncomfortable or
Yeah.
I have to take care of somebody else. And
Wow, that makes me so happy.
yeah, it can happen. But it's also the fear is the other side is that you definitely all scare them off eventually, though. Right. That's the thing. I'm always like a little bit afraid of that.
Right.
I ask a couple times a week, you're not leaving, right?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe even this morning I might have.
But even, it's like I've that feeling, I have lived in dread of that feeling all the time. And now, again, I feel like but if we name it, right? And if we show up 100% of ourselves and people leave, well, at least we showed up 100% of ourselves, and okay.
I feel like that now too. If somebody leaves and this is who I am.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's not always ugly. But I didn't always feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. Because I didn't feel like there was a real me underneath. Like I was so busy just trying to tread water, but now I do feel like I'm coming to terms with accepting this solid me, but I also understand this. I have, if you go into a garden of flowers, like the flower is the flower. It didn't choose to be that way. It's just that way. And if you don't like it, well, the flower can't do anything about it, and like in some ways we're all the same, right? And there's more of a trust of, no, actually I don't trust. I'm just willing to sit with the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not really true because I'm not dating. I'm too scared.
In theory. In theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I'm finally finding my voice a little bit in the world. And
yeah, for sure.
When I am around, dating or whatever, I'm like, I'm an interesting person too. You don't have to just talk about yourself.
Yeah.
I have a voice, and I was so busy my whole life, just pleasing and
Mhm.
hiding who I am. And
Yeah.
Making
Isn't that
sure they
amazing?
liked us, making sure they liked
Right.
us, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes Sarah will say something and I'm like, they're not worthy of you. In my opinion, you're amazing. So like they're not worthy. That's how I feel. Like we've come a long way, right? So people should be worthy of us.
Yeah. I think that's true.
In theory.
Yeah. Well, and I also just think it's like if part of it has to do with sort of like how your energy presents itself. And so if you're insecure, you're probably going to attract either a narcissist
Mhm.
or someone who's as insecure as you are. And so that's just because you haven't been able to be, at least for me, because I wasn't able to be my real self, then I attract something that resonates with that. And what I'm finding is that like I feel myself getting calmer, but I'm not quite there yet. And so it'd be
Mhm.
really hard to like meet someone and
Mm.
be grounded. I think it's so neat that you're doing that, Louise, because that for me,
It happened to me. Thank
wow.
God. I feel like
That's
I have
kind of
very
a
little to do with it.
great. That's feels like I'm trying to think of like a metaphor for it, but
Yeah.
almost like I'm closed for lunch,
Yeah.
Yeah. I like
Yeah.
that metaphor.
I'll
Yeah.
open up again soon, but right
Yeah.
now
I'm in the cocoon right now.
yeah.
And I'm
that may be-
I'm organizing.
I'm closed for lunch. I like
Yeah, I'm
that.
closed
It's
for lunch.
The little sign.
be right back, but just while like there are more layers to get to. And you're right. Because if I'm putting out a vibe, then what are you going to get? What I've
Right.
gotten my whole life. And that's not what
Yeah.
I want,
No, and I feel like that there's, if you've been trained, I mean, I've been trained to look at other people before I look at myself.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I'm working, and the dog is a part of it. It's like existing in the space with something and being a separate body.
I think it's an amazing thing when we discover we don't have to do that for people anymore. Like I've learned to say no. And even if I wanted to say no, I would somehow end up saying yes in a roundabout way, not just
Yeah.
with men, but with anything. Will you help me with this? Will you do this for me? Now I'm like, no,
Yeah.
or I can't go. I'm busy. I don't need to give an explanation. I don't feel like doing that. Those are amazing things to say, which some
Yeah.
people have their whole lives.
So
some
radical.
people knew how to do that right out the gate.
Right out the gate. And I'm just like, no. Okay. And it feels so good. It's like,
Yeah, it sounds so easy, but when you're doing it, it's like someone tells you, you could take off your arm if you wanted to. And you're like,
there was this guy, this is really dating myself, but David Viscott, I don't know, you're both from Los Angeles, but he was, or have lived in Los Angeles. He was a talk show personality of a therapist back in the day. He killed himself, sadly. I got to dig in more about him, but he had a whole thing on saying no. And I used to listen to it at night, late night, driving in my car, 11 p.m. back in the day in the 80s, 90s. And
wow.
he was really big on your boundaries and saying no. And I would practice it and I'd be like, but I didn't understand the core of why I didn't.
Right.
I think that's why it didn't work. Not just saying no, but he had a whole thing about your boundaries. And I just,
Well, to have a boundary, you have to have
Yeah.
a sense of self.
Yes.
Right. So if you don't have a
Yes.
sense of self, what are you putting a boundary on?
Yeah. Right. And I didn't get it. So now I'm like, gosh, I got to go find that and re-listen
wow.
to it. And,
Also, us not having boundaries is what saved us when we were babies, because like a stranger came in, broke through our boundaries and took us. And if we had kept our boundary up, we would have died. And we wouldn't have bonded. So I think we have been trained to not have boundaries.
most adoptees are chameleons, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can fit into most situations, and
Yeah.
just the friends I know are all very good at that.
Yeah.
Because it's a survival skill.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're right. I mean, the things that we're craving now saved us early.
Yeah.
It's a deep conversation, Anne.
I know. And untraditional podcast today, but
I like it.
people can read your book to know your adoption story.
Yeah.
This
I'm
is
so tired of telling it. It's just like, well,
I like when you're
and
like, I was a
then
baby.
blah blah blah. Yeah, I was a baby. Cut to age 45. Couldn't make money.
not a
couldn't
baby anymore.
I kind of like it. I love
Well, because you know what I realized? I realized that like all my life I've had a tail, but I didn't know there was a tail. I just knew like there was something impeding me.
Mm.
And then the waking up and realizing like, oh my God, I have this huge tail behind me and this is really causing me trouble. So then I wrote the book about being adopted, which describes the tail, but the tail stayed on because I described it.
Uh-huh.
And then the mushrooms have let me focus on my body. So the tail just sort of naturally fizzles away because I'm not giving it attention anymore.
Mm.
And now I get to focus on my body. And it's such a relief after just trying to figure out like what happened and why am I the way, like what is wrong with me? What's wrong and what's wrong with me?
Mhm.
And that all was about the tail.
That's a real-
how long has
yeah.
it been that you said 8 times you've taken mushrooms?
Okay, it's probably more because I found a way to get them. Because so when I did the
You might be
MDMA
moving back to the West Coast, but it sounds like it could be Oregon or
know.
Colorado
Well,
where it's legal.
now I know how to get, now I know ways, but, and also, so when I did the MDMA and the mushrooms, it's very expensive to do
Yes.
it, like super expensive. And so I'm also trying to find ways. I know one adoptee who will sit with people, not being trained, but I want to be able to figure out how to do that because I feel like, especially with mushrooms, it's such an interior trip. You don't really need someone saying things to you. You just need someone there
Safety.
to feel safe. But when I had done them and then I didn't have mushrooms available to me, and it was like the door had opened and I wanted more, but I couldn't get it. That was so heartbreaking. And then I figured out a way. So then I've probably done it like 10 times and not huge. I haven't ever done huge doses. I've done big enough so that I go somewhere, but the information, I would never, it has me feel things I wouldn't feel normally because my brain has been trained to stop me from feeling those things.
Mhm.
And so I just want to keep feeling it. From all the things I've listened to, people that do mushrooms at some point, they're sort of like, okay, I'm done now. I don't, and you can't get addicted to them supposedly because, if you do them a bunch of days in a row, they just stop working. So
Yeah.
if you microdose, for example, it's like 4 days on, 3 days off. But it feels so honest to actually be fit. It's like I've had the flavor of sadness, the deep flavor, but not the heart of it, not the deep trigger point. And the mushrooms bring me to that place. Like they bring me right into my heart, where I saw this cool anatomy video. It's with this guy, Gil Headley, and he teaches anatomy, and he took the heart and he showed you how the heart is in spirals, and he unwound the heart. It's in 2 sections and it unwinds until it's flat. And I was thinking, okay, I am unwinding my heart and I'm letting go of the things that are really tight in it. Like if you can look at anatomy,
Yeah, I'd
stomach
like to
it.
look at that.
Yeah, just look up Gil Headley and heart. He does all sorts of anatomy. It's helpful just to see.
Well, we're so disconnected from our bodies. I mean, it's it is amazing to me. And younger people are more connected, it's this generation or just generations coming up. I feel I have conversations with them where I'm learning a lot. And yeah, it is expensive though. I have a friend who goes and it's like, oh,
Yes,
I
like
know it's not
3,000
accessible to
$3,000.
yeah. And
no.
Yeah.
Well, it's new. And
Mhm.
Like anything, it's like if it's doing good work and there's a price tag on it now,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The accessibility is,
Yeah.
it can, people who
Yeah,
really
that will
need it and
It'll
can't
be a
afford
few more years, but that Michael Pollan series, How to Change
Yeah.
Your Mind.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah.
Did, I know we have to wrap it up soon, but I'm just curious, have you ever tried ayahuasca?
I haven't. I'm afraid of the throwing up, and it feels super extreme.
Yeah.
But I have you?
No, I was listening to that podcast with what's his name, Gabriel Mott.
Oh yeah,
Mott? Yeah,
Motley.
yeah, and
Yeah,
he had run this whole retreat somewhere with ayahuasca, and he's like,
Yeah.
it cost people a fortune, and it was my thing, and then the shamans said, you can't be here, you still have bad energy, and after all these years of his own work and his book writing and the talks about grief and loneliness and identity, and they're like, and it boiled down to his ego. He still had
wow.
the ego that was kind of running him. So he did another session, and he said it just flattened him, and like it changed him once again, another layer that he, but again, that's like, you have to go to another country, you have to spend thousands of dollars, and
Yeah. And I feel like it could be more accessible. It just, yeah, I'm working on it.
well, this has just been amazing, unexpected, and
yeah, a really neat conversation. I feel very comfortable. I'm breathing in this conversation. I feel don't you guys? Like,
yeah, it's very comfortable. Yeah, it's so much of it is community and feeling safe, and then like then that makes you feel hopeful, or makes me feel hopeful.
Yeah.
So I really, really appreciate you guys. Your listening and your questions are wonderful, and your friendship is so clear and darling.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate all the adoptees and listeners and people who aren't adopted who are listening, because education's everything,
Yeah.
And we're having our own education. I think maybe that's why it's. Oh, are you still there? Maybe that may be why it works for.
I lost you guys. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Yeah. She's starting I
have something going on with my sound on my computer.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's been a really great journey of our own education through it. I think that's why it works for everybody.
Yeah, I think so too.
Guys, I'm sorry, I have no sound in my computer.
Oh, but we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, but she can't hear us.
Hear you.
Okay, now I can hear you. Sorry, everything just went bad.
I was saying that I think Anne was saying thank you for our friendship in the podcast. And I was saying, I think part of the reason it resonates is because we're going through our own education with it.
Yeah.
At the same time as other people. So it's not like we're some experts on the scene saying we're literally like, wow, really? Learning as we go.
And that's why I think people resonate with that. This sense of discovery, not knowing everything, it's not that I know everything, it's just I'm curious, and we're all curious together.
Yeah, it's a safe community for sure. It's been really a neat thing to find.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, well, enjoy your weekend, and thank you I feel this was a great honor. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great.
And let's stay in touch.
Yeah, I would love that.
Do some cool stuff.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Okay.
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.